Hello, everyone. I'm Alexandra August.
I'm Johnny Kolasinski.
And welcome to GoT Thrones, a Game of Thrones podcast.
We haven't said that in so long. Actually, it's only been a couple weeks.
Only been a couple of weeks of the trailer episode. But it doesn't feel like I like erased that from my memory because it was so short.
Yeah. So this is GoT Thrones, Game of Thrones podcast. You can find us online at gotthrones.com, on Facebook, GoT Thrones, and on Twitter at GoTThronesPcast.
Yeah, there is. I don't love our Twitter handle, but it's grown on me over the years. It was kind of a desperate. We need a Twitter handle, and literally every other variations of GoT Thrones was taken.
Let's give it like another 9 weeks and then retire it.
Sounds good.
All right.
Good. Because guess what's happening in 9 weeks? We're out of a job.
Yeah. We're going to have to talk about Star Trek or something.
JK, no one pays us to do this.
Not this season.
Not this season, no. Yeah, so I don't know if you've heard, folks, but Game of Thrones Season 8 is upon us. And it's the very last one.
Yeah. They're going to be wrapping it up in a block of, 6 18-hour episodes?
In point of fact, there are 3 around 80-minute episodes, and then 3 that are, like, just a little under an hour. So for all the hoopla about them being like, it'll be 6 episodes, but it'll basically be like a 10-hour season because they'll be so long, was hoopla and propaganda.
Yeah. The longest episode is about the length of Home Alone.
Yep, or The Little Mermaid. For some reason, it sticks in my head that The Little Mermaid was 88 minutes. I owned the VHS and was like,
because it was... Everyone read all the text on all of their VHSs at some point, or were really weird, and it's why we have pop culture podcasts.
Both these are not mutually exclusive. The Venn diagram could be a circle.
Yeah. So we're going to do something a little bit different.
Oh, wait, before
we should talk about what we're going to do this season first, and it's going to be something a little bit different.
Yeah. So Johnny and I have, for the last 2 seasons, I believe, done hot takes immediately after the episode airs, dropping you like what we aim to be like a 30-minute podcast, but is usually like 45 because we get really excited. So for season 6 and season 7, we did that, and then we recorded a full-length podcast later in the week. I am going to fess up to you guys. I like to drink wine and watch Game of Thrones. It is a fun party that is recreational for me, and I've discovered that affects my ability to podcast right after and not sound like a garbage person. Or just like somebody who was like, oh my god.
Yeah. So we're skipping the hot takes.
Yeah. Also, Johnny, like, it's not just because I'm an alcoholic. It's just because Johnny and I have discovered that immediately after watching something, we are less than objective, and we just think it makes for better content for you guys if we sit on it for like 2 days or so and manage to get something a little bit more organized.
And so that Alex can watch Battle of the Bastards 3 times.
Or Alex can watch Game of Thrones sober once.
Once.
As opposed to the first time, which I'm usually been day drinking on. No, I'm not. I'm making myself out to be a complete souse, and that's not the case.
You too could live the dream and start a podcast, folks. So yeah, we're going to be launching more less screamy woo takes on Tuesday mornings for you. So the in-depth conversation that you're generally used to, as opposed to, oh my god, girl, can you believe it?
You're gonna get serious business this season on GoT Thrones.
We're done with it. No more humor.
This is adult time.
No more funny voices.
Jon Snow voice retired. He's a man. Kill the boy. That's what this podcast is doing right now. Killing the boy. Goodbye, hot takes. You're for children. Shout out to Game of Owns, whose hot takes I love.
So yeah, Tuesday mornings, in-depth discussion. If, however, we're super excited and or super in our cups, you might still get a hot take once in a while.
I'm going to go ahead and give you, when we say might, there's a 99% chance you're going to get a
You're going to hear us Sunday night.
Yeah, possibly this Sunday.
I'm going to be jet lagged from Vegas, even though it's an hour flight.
That side. I think once you get to Vegas, the jet lag starts, and it's not so much jet lag as it's Vegas lag.
Yep.
You're just on a 3-day hangover. But basically, I'm of the position I would rather under promise you guys and over deliver. So you will definitely be getting some really wonderful content from us for the next 6 weeks. And you might be getting more than we initially promised if the spirit moves us, or if the spirits move us. One thing we are continuing though from last season, and I think the season before, if you would like to send us a rendition of you and your friends singing the Game of Thrones theme song like we know you do every time it comes on. If you're listening into this podcast, I know that every Sunday at 9 p.m. you're like, bum, bum, ba-da, bum, bum, ba-da, bum, bum. You know it too. You should just record that and email it to us, and we'll
name drop you. Or, if you prefer, we won't.
If you prefer, we won't. But we will make it our theme song for the week. Our good friend Katarina Albrecht, a good friend of the podcast, recorded one and sent it to us last year. And however many years ago this was. It's throwing me off that there was no Game of Thrones in 2018.
Oh, you're right.
It's just, I'm all afluddle. So, 8 years ago, when last we podcasted, Katarina Albrecht sent us a phenomenal rendition of her over the phone singing along to the Game of Thrones theme. And look, Ramin's beautiful, beautiful music deserves lyrics. Give it some lyrics, folks. They can be nonverbals if you want, but give it throw some lyrics. We might have a little prize. We have to work out what that is for somebody, whoever throws us the best one for the end of the season. So if you're into
autographed copy of Winds of Winter.
Yep, the first one. We will have our Winds of Winter. What we think Winds of Winter will be. So it's probably going to be 20 pages long.
Mostly about gravy.
And direwolves. Okay. Oh, and if you could rate us, and we still need some visibility. If you happen to be near a computer or a phone that allows you to leave reviews on such apps as Stitcher and Spotify and Google Play or iTunes, if you could throw us a review,
so.
give us a little rate and love.
Let us go out strong.
Yeah, that's what we want. Johnny and I have not really discussed whether or not we're going to continue on with GoT Thrones after the series ends. I'm probably just surprising him right now by bringing this up.
Are we having this discussion now?
I know. I just feel like that was
on camera.
I don't know why. I don't know why I did that. We haven't discussed that, but we will.
We will continue podcasting.
Yeah, we're definitely you'll definitely see us. We'll probably be doing something on this feed since it has the most subscriptions, but we'll definitely be continuing with Star Trek in a more
evergreen way.
Yeah, in a more evergreen way. And since there will be a continuous stream of Game of Thrones content probably for our natural born at the end of our natural lives, we may or may not come back to do some more on that. We love this franchise. But we will see. So, if you feel like it, we would love it if you threw us a review or subscribed. And
we'd love it if you told a friend about it.
Yeah,
and said, hey, you've got 6 weeks to catch one of the most okay Game of Thrones podcasts out there.
We're pretty okay. Pretty okay. And with that, I think we can get into our episode this week. Instead of doing kind of a traditional pregame as we've done in previous seasons, filled with predictions, speculation, general excitement, we thought it would be fun instead, since this is our very last Game of Thrones season premiere, to take a look back, do a little retrospective on the previous Game of Thrones season premieres and see how, just revisit them, rewatch them a little bit, discuss them, see how they kind of compare next to each other, see how this particular episode in every season has evolved as the story has evolved. There are some it's a strange way to watch this series. It is very, it's kind of
disjointed.
Yeah, it's really disjointed, but in a very emotionally wrought way, because basically I rewatched a bunch of them yesterday, and basically it was like, oh, there's Ned, and then season 2 premiere,
oh, no more Ned,
very dead, very, very dead. And then Robb and Catelyn are around, and then the season 4 premiere comes up, and there's no more Robb and Catelyn, and it's
yeah. And season 3 is really where they get heavy. Oh, we're gonna surprise you at the end of the premiere, with Selmy showing up. Uncle Barry.
Oh, Papa.
We've got nicknames for all these characters that I haven't thought about in years.
I know.
And yeah, it gets to be a twist. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to read you the incredibly overdramatic Wikipedia entries on these episodes.
It's weird though. Sometimes they're overdramatic, and sometimes they just cover up what was actually like a horrible, brutal murder on the show. Like Tyrion confronts Tywin in the season whatever finale, and you're like, oh god, that's an understatement. But yeah, they are also hilariously dramatic as well. So just for fun, we're gonna read them, and that way you guys can have a memory refresher. So can we.
And then we'll discuss. Hey, this is what mattered. This is what we really thought mattered and absolutely didn't, Stannis. And this is what kind of this more from a thematics or production angle is what wouldn't really fit now.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see how the show has evolved over the course of these. But yeah, okay. So let's start with numero uno. Winter is. Do you want to? Shall you read the odds or shall I read the odds? Johnny?
I'll let you read the odds.
Well, alrighty then.
I'll give you the extra one.
Thanks. I like to talk. He knows this about me. So, season 1, episode 1 of Game of Thrones, titled "Winter is Coming." In the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, like once upon a time.
Once upon a time.
A soldier of the ancient Night's Watch order survives an attack by supernatural creatures known as the White Walkers, thought until now to be mythical. He rushes to Castle Winterfell, which is ruled by Eddard, quote, Ned Stark, Warden of the North, who decapitates the soldier for desertion. I know. What a jerk. In King's Landing, the capital, Jon Arryn, the king's hand, dies under mysterious circumstances. King Robert Baratheon, Ned's longtime friend, travels to Winterfell to offer the position to him and propose marriage between his firstborn son Joffrey and Ned's older daughter Sansa. Ned's wife, Catelyn, receives a letter from her sister Lysa, Jon Arryn's widow, saying she has escaped King's Landing and that Jon was murdered by the Lannisters, Queen Cersei's family. Catelyn burns the letter and tells Ned about it, believing that the Lannisters are plotting against Robert. Ned's 10-year-old son, Brandon, climbs a tower where he witnesses Cersei having sex with her twin brother, Jaime, who then pushes him out the window from a presumably fatal height. Meanwhile, across the narrow sea in Essos, the exiled Prince Viserys Targaryen makes a deal with the Dothraki warlord Khal Drogo, who marries Viserys' younger sister Daenerys in exchange for providing Viserys an army to conquer Westeros and reclaim the Iron Throne. Bum, bum, bum.
Remember when the creepiest thing about Game of Thrones was two twins having sex?
Yes. I love that we actually meet a White Walker that episode, but the creepiest thing is that sex scene.
What the hell kind of show is this?
That was such a... I mean, I had read the books at that point, but I think this is... what I like about Winter is Coming, and what I've come back to it even like before we were prepping for this episode, is that I still... Winter is Coming, even though it's one episode, it so perfectly introduces you to every single key player on the screen. And it perfectly captures the Starks as this wonderful, not without problems, Catelyn, Jon Snow, looking at you guys, not without its issues, but it introduces them in such a way that they nail the normalcy of that so well. Mm-hmm. They communicate that it still feels like right in my head. You know, it feels like we just need to get... I don't know if I'm articulating myself very well.
It doesn't... It is... I think that season 1 of Game of Thrones, and I think I've said this before, is to a fault the best adaptation of a book on television.
Yeah, very much
with the possible exception of The Expanse. And like to a fault, where I've mentioned this before, I didn't make it through season 1 because it was point by point by point perfect to the books.
And there just really aren't any surprises. And since Game of Thrones is, I would say, arguably the most accessible book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, it doesn't lend itself really well to being adapted for television. But there's just not a lot. It's not like the TV show added more mystery to the novel, and the novel was already pretty accessible, so there just wasn't a lot to discover in it. And they didn't have a huge budget, I mean, by comparison, so it's also not that spectacular in terms of an effects standpoint. There aren't any dragons. We see one White Walker in the prologue. The most astonishing shot for me remains the shot that we get of the wall. Right, of the wall. And that's very impressive. But other than that, like, this season kind of like lived and died on its actors. I would think, and just Ned Stark. Doing that. And so I think I agree with you. It's kind of a frustrating season to watch as a book reader, but it's also arguably one of their strongest because all they had was writing and acting to get people interested in this, because there wasn't anything sexy about it until the last 2 episodes. I know that we're never going to get to see the original pilot of the series that was supposedly awful. But as well executed as this one is, I hope that someone down the line, finds it in a vault. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm very curious. I'm trying to just figure out how to express that thing about this, like that. They identified the Starks so well as this family and identified their dynamics so well in one episode that I can't really believe that we only got them all together in one episode, because it feels so recent. It feels like that was just a longer, more extended period of time than it was. I don't know. And I've always been kind of fascinated with how effective that hour of television was in that particular thing. Yeah, I mean, by the next episode we're going to discuss, Ned's dead, Arya's gone. Everyone. Sansa's stuck at the Red Keep, giving herself a stress ulcer. And Catelyn's beginning to work with Robb. Yep. It's again, it's nuts. It's also interesting how well they set up. Yeah, I think it's fascinating how well they set up so many of the customs of Westeros immediately. You understand that sense of honor immediately. All the chess pieces are laid out on the board perfectly. Everyone, like, it's just kind of a brilliant. I shouldn't say it's a brilliant pilot. I feel like it's a brilliant pilot. I've never written a pilot before, and I'm not sure exactly like what you're supposed to do all the time, but or really, I couldn't say that from a TV writer's perspective, but it feels like for the introduction of as big an ensemble cast as this is, and not only an ensemble of characters, an ensemble of cultures. Not only are you introducing, and then not only on top of that, it's literally a whole new world. So, like, the fact that the credits are a map sequence, I continue to think is such a fucking stroke of genius. Because I feel like they knew going into it that people would be frustrated and confused a lot of the time just out the gate, because there's so much to remember and so much to keep in your head that if, like, they're like, well, we can at least give them a location so they can, kind of visualize where things go or where people are. Yeah, that the credits for this will probably not be beaten for a long time. Yeah. Oh, fun fact, if you check Oreo's Twitter, they have created an Oreo-themed Game of Thrones video. It's a Game of Thrones credits parody. It's really funny. And it will make you want Oreos. One of the things that I like most about this episode, now that we're 5 books and 7 seasons in, is the fact that it lies to us. Yeah. With Lysa's letter to Jon Arryn, or to Jon Arryn, with Lysa's letter to Catelyn, I mean, she's pretty cognizant of what happened, I think. What do you mean? Who, Lysa, or? Yeah. Oh, you mean, does she know that what do you mean? Yeah. The fact that Littlefinger was involved. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think she even says before he kills her that he directed her to do that.
Yeah.
That she's like, I did what you told me. I like that too, that it's from the very beginning Littlefinger's conspiracy is at work. From the very, very first episode. What we get 5 seasons, what we get like 4 seasons later.
And 4 different answers to that question first.
Yep. Yeah, people like... I get that tends to be why I sort of disconnect when people start talking about harping on how Catelyn kidnapping Tyrion was sort of the match that lit everything on fire. And I don't think that's untrue. I just think it would have happened. Something would have happened. Littlefinger would have made sure that blaze got lit between these families who can't stand each other, between a husband and wife who hate each other, between a terrible king and his best friend who's trying to fix things. He knew that all of like those elements were going to make for a way to create chaos for him to rise up. And I just like, so yeah, sure, Catelyn arresting Tyrion forced Tywin's hand a bit and caused the conflict in the Riverlands, blah, blah, blah. But
it would have been Sansa and Joffrey.
Yeah, like something was going to happen.
Yeah.
So... yeah, so I think winter's coming.
And then just like briefly of characters who we met and then won't be mentioning anymore. We've got both Viserys and Khal Drogo. One of whom remains relevant. The other of whom is a douche.
And whose namesake dragon was the first one to be offed. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
I never liked Viserion.
Yeah.
JK. He was rather a dragon. Wasn't his fault. I think also just the kind of the Stark household. I was watching, I think maybe it was The North Remembers or Valar Dohaeris, where we see I got it in one of those in the season 2 premiere, the season 3 premiere, where Bran is shown acting as Lord of the Manor with Maester Aemon. I was like, not Maester Aemon, Maester Luwin. Oh, and I was just like, oh my god, I loved you. Like, I loved Luwin. He was such a kind, warm presence. He was so well acted, and it's like, you've been gone for so long. That time felt like the seasons 2 and 3 feel very far away.
Yes.
As much as I harp on the fact that like how well they established the Stark family and that thing, it's just now I feel like now, since we're finally kind of graduating from the politics of Game of Thrones into this main conflict with the Night King, and getting heavier into the supernatural stuff, that does feel much more far. That these early seasons of the show where the dragons were tiny and nobody was making these big, world scale moves. Poor Drogo just had such promise, and then
yep.
I always liken him to like a cat, like my cat running, like my childhood cat growing up would like run around the house like a crazy creature at like 9 p.m. for some reason around that time of night, just lose his mind and get really energetic. He'd run, and occasionally he would get stabbed by a table leg, a surprise table leg, like just straight run into it.
That's Drogo to you?
Yeah, he just like runs around, big ball of energy, very excited, and then cuts himself and dies.
Poor Drogo.
I know, I do miss him.
What's that guy
I'm
up
still
to
pissed.
now?
I'm still upset. He's in some
Did the actor go anywhere?
Comic book movie.
Jason Momoa, if you're listening, wow, I'm kind of impressed that you're listening.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So yeah, okay, let's move on to The North Remembers, which is
Season 2, Episode 1.
Much has changed.
Much has changed. To Cersei's dismay, Tyrion takes up his post as acting hand at King's Landing. At Dragonstone, Stannis proclaims allegiance to Melisandre's new god, lays public claim to the Iron Throne, and reveals Joffrey's bastardry. Bastardness. Joffrey orders the soldiers to slaughter Robert's bastards, one of whom, named Gendry, manages to escape King's Landing along with Arya. Having won 3 victories, Robb offers the Lannisters peace in exchange for the North's independence and Sansa's return. He sends Theon to gain the support of Balon Greyjoy, his father, and Catelyn. Yeah. and Catelyn to seek alliance with Renly Baratheon, who totally still matters and also claims the Iron Throne. Behind the wall...
I'm sorry.
Behind the wall, the Night's Watch find shelter with Craster. Oh, wow. I forgot about Craster. And his daughters/wives. In Essos, as her people slowly die in the Red Waste, Daenerys sends out riders to conduct reconnaissance.
My favorite part, I didn't rewatch Winter is Coming, but I rewatched The North Remembers, and Stannis' introduction is just so pitch perfect. Like, shows up and all... It is. We've not seen Stannis at this point. He's a brand new character. He's mentioned in the first season, but he's not been seen. And not only do we get him and we introduce him, we get his fucking strange cult priestess lady who's burning effigies, and like he seems to burning effigies and declaring Stannis like a lord of light. And you meet this guy and he seems very serious and not a spectacularly emotional person. Not really somebody you would think would be a fanatic, and he looks really uncomfortable in this whole situation. But at the same time, it's very bold, and he immediately establishes himself as a character with such presence. And then it's the first time we get our look at the map table, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's sitting around, and he's like auto-correcting. I think it's Mathis.
Yep.
Yeah, it's his son. It's Davos' son. And Mathis is writing a letter, and he's like, he says, my beloved brother Robert is dead. And Stannis is like, I didn't love him. Don't put that in there. And then he's like, he talks about Joffrey, and he's like, call him a bastard. He's a bastard. That's what he is. It's just like, it's such a I mean, they just nailed him. Just like they nailed the Stark family and Ned, they nail Stannis in this episode. And it's just a wonderful introduction to him.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, the only person who would like Game of Thrones less than Stephen Delane would be Stannis.
This is true. Folks, if you're not, if you haven't watched I haven't watched much video of Stephen Delane, but he's kind of a humorless guy. He's not a fanboy at all. Like, I would be super surprised if he showed up at any of the season 8 stuff. Like, he's just not into it.
What we're saying is he's not acting. He's a great actor, but he's not acting. Not
in this case. Whereas Liam Cunningham loves it. Like, they kind of mirror their characters even in real life, which is kind of funny. But we are all greatly. I also just watched the season 5 premiere when Stannis is at the wall and he's just saved them all from the battle with the wildlings, and it's funny to me because Stannis really gets so far and just
he flew too close to the sun.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you put your faith in a woman who sees visions in fire and thinks it's cool to like kinslay
burn your daughter,
eventually you can't outrun that.
Yeah.
And
ultimately, though, other than getting Melisandre to the wall and slowing down Cersei/Joffrey,
like mildly
at the Blackwater, what did Stannis do that mattered?
I know. I mean, I feel like that's blasphemy saying it because the character is such a wonderful character, but
and saving everyone.
I think what I like about this introduction to him is that we see an example. He serves as an example of another kind of man that's in Westeros, that not every single politician or person in power is corrupt. I mean, Stannis is a little bit too on the black and white side. Like, he could see a little bit more gray, but
he's lawful neutral.
Yeah, exactly. And he has moral values, and he does have a sense of honor and duty. He's not much fun, but there's value in that. There's value in that kind of stability. And what I love too is that I think one of the biggest things that he does is he announces it to anybody who will listen that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are products of incest, and he outs Jaime and Cersei. And I think by ringing that bell, he did some serious damage to the Lannister name, because even though, you know, nothing really nothing happens as an immediate consequence of him sending that letter, not much happens. And and I could be wrong about that, but I didn't rewatch the seasons. I just rewatched the premieres, so we'll see. But please write us angry letters if I am wrong. But like, really,
podcast@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. I think what he does is, like, I think that coming from Stannis, coming from a guy whom everybody knows, for better or for worse, will tell the truth, was pretty big.
Yeah.
And he also made it impossible for Renly to hold the Iron Throne. Obviously, he did that. But other than that, yeah, I think that's sort of part of the tragedy of his story, is that he, despite being so qualified and so honorable and such a better person than anyone in the Red Keep, save Sansa, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. Can you imagine if Mike Baratheon had just 2 sons?
Steve Baratheon.
Mike,
you're thinking of Mike Tyrell.
Mike Tyrell. Yeah, Steve's roommate. If Steve Baratheon had 2 sons, and there hadn't been the party boy Renly to deal with, and his kingdom of brunch, we probably would have gotten Stannis on the Iron Throne.
Yeah. Because I think that one thing that I feel like they didn't hit enough in the show was that they Stannis being haunted at the fact that he has slain his brother. He dreams of like in the novels, he dreams of peaches, which is what Renly, famously eats in their meeting, as a snide flippant move to Stannis, as a show of disrespect. And Stannis is really, like, stopped sleeping. He can't escape these nightmares. And so you really see how the effects of murdering his brother, like, it changes him. And I think that's part of, I think, Martin making it impossible for him to win, because he's really stained by that deed. And I feel like we didn't get a ton of that in the show. No. They kind of move on to his crazy wife and his adorable daughter, and
yeah, kinslaying is the ultimate crime in Westeros, in the world of Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what broke Stannis, and that's what broke Tyrion, and that's probably what's going to be what breaks Jaime, if you've been paying attention.
Yeah, we're all pretty certain that Jaime is going to eventually execute Cersei, and if we get Clegane Bowl and we don't get the Valonqar fulfillment, that's all I have. I'm not excited about that possibility.
I just want Jaime and Arya to have the old Yeller moment, and no, Arya, she's my sister.
Jamie's like, Arya's like, what if I kill you and wear your face? It's like, no.
That's a way to think outside the box, but this is my job.
Appreciate your ideas. This is something I noticed too. I believe up until season 5, we got pre-credit sequences on the season premieres.
Mm-hmm.
Which was just kind of, and like, interestingly, season 5, they stopped doing that, but we do get our first and only flashback, which is Cersei's memory of Maggie the Frog, which we'll get to when we discuss that episode. But I just thought that was just an interesting thing I noticed. Oh, and Salador San, I miss that dude.
Yeah, and he doesn't have nearly the epicness, the Salador Sonniness that we get in the books.
Yeah, imagine Sala from Indiana Jones, but with way more money and way more flair.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just don't get enough of him. He pops back up in Valar Dohaeris because he eventually, when Davos gets rescued from his rock, he's taken to Salador. But something else I wanted to mention too is that this episode was just full of like moments that made me like just sort of clutch my pearls in amazement a little bit, because this is that great. There's just a lot of really brilliant dialogue and scene work that were so reminiscent of the early seasons of the show, like between Jaime and Robb, when Robb comes in and just stares him down with Grey Wind. And you get to see how, like, at some point, Jaime kind of snidely goes, well, 3 victories don't make you a conqueror. And Robb just goes, better than 3 defeats. And Grey Wind's, like, right by his side, and Grey Wind is huge. And then Grey Wind goes up and, like, growls right at Jaime's face. And we see simultaneously how scared and vulnerable Jaime is and how much of a man Robb has become in this short time. And how he is make serious business. You killed my dad. This is now serious business.
Yeah.
Serious business person. And then we get that great scene between Cersei and Littlefinger where she has him surrounded. He points out to her that knowledge is power, and he does so in that really just arrogant, slimy Littlefinger way where he's really condescending, and I don't, like, this is not redemptive of Cersei at all, but she's like, oh yeah? And she turns the guards to him, and she's like, surround him, cut his throat. Wait, don't. I've changed my mind. Turn around, close your eyes. And she just goes, and she's, power is power.
That to me is Cersei in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it's surprising that was so early. Because it's the exact same thing she would do now, just drunker.
Yeah, and she'd probably go through with it. Like, Littlefinger probably would not have survived that meeting, I feel like, in this case. Cersei had some fucks. She had 3 very big fucks to give at the beginning of this series that she no longer has now. I think also another, that's also when that's when she slaps the shit out of Joffrey when he's in the throne room redecorating and just being the worst. He talks about the bastards that have come up that are known to be Robert Baratheons, and he says, oh, I assume he just stops, like, these are just women that he slept with when he grew tired of you, and she slaps him. But then at the end of the episode, we're hanging out in the brothel, in Littlefinger's brothel, because Roz is still alive and trading other whores, and the Kingsguard, or the Gold Cloaks, burst in, and we meet one of the prostitutes that Ned met last year, who has one of Robert's babies. And I think it's a little girl, and they kill her. And then there's that sequence of a bunch of kids being killed, and it was just... And then they search for Gendry. And the last sequence, the last scene of the premiere is Arya and Gendry getting into Yoren's wagon headed north for the Wall. And Gendry is carrying his helmet.
His bull helmet.
His bull helmet. I like Gendry so much. He's such a simple guy. Needs a hammer, needs a helmet, wants to fight. I wrote in my notes, there's a lot of... This episode really flowed in terms of connectivity for me. Like, I don't know that I really appreciated at the beginning of this show how well they tell an ensemble story, because, oh my goodness, do they bite off so much. And yet everything, I guess because everybody is still at this point reacting to Ned's death, and his death kind of unites them all in the fallout. So everybody is still pretty related, so it feels that way. But the scene with Jaime and Robb moving into the scene with Robb and Catelyn, and Catelyn's like, Robb sending Theon off to treat with Balon, and Catelyn's like, don't do that. Don't trust Balon Greyjoy. And he's like, I can see why you wouldn't trust Balon Greyjoy. She's like, yeah, because he's not trustworthy. Don't do it. I might have gone off the rails with that.
I feel like if season 1 was an amazing adaptation of the book, season 2 as a whole, and not just as a pilot, is where Game of Thrones finds a little bit more of its own voice.
Yeah, I would.
They're playing. They aren't. It's not a word for word adaptation anymore. They're doing things like swapping out. This is later in the season, but swapping out Tywin for Papa Bolton, Roose Bolton, with where Arya, because in the books Arya is a servant to Roose and not to Tywin.
And such an improvement. such an improvement. Also, too, just the fact that at the beginning of that episode, Stannis calls out Joffrey as a bastard and then kind of inadvertently winds up getting all of his nephews killed.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know if that's... It was an interesting bookend for that Stannis calls out, that Stannis announces... I should say that Stannis doesn't really harp on the incest part of Joffrey's birth more than he...
He doesn't get incensed about the incest?
No, he does not. I mean, I'm sure it bothers him a little bit, but he also has a wife who's keeping babies in jars, so kind of a glass houses throwing stone situation, if you ask me. But he does make he makes a big point of Joffrey's bastardy because that means he's illegitimate and he can't sit the throne. So self-correction there. But
how did you feel being back at Dragonstone?
Feels like Dragonstone. I think Emmett Booth, who is Poor Quentin on Twitter and does the Nauticast with Brendan Beefish. His first name is Jeff. I don't know his last name. If you're listening, tweet us. And we had a Twitter exchange once where we talked about Dragonstone and just how, like, what an awful place to be, and he described it as like, oh, just a sad, strange goth castle. And that's exactly how I picture it. It just looks miserable.
It's like drinking in a goth bar at 2 p.m. rather than 2 a.m.
Yeah, just all the time. All the time. Everyone is emo, there's horrible lighting, everyone is pale, and looks like they'd rather be someplace else.
Because they would, because it's Dragonstone.
That's true. Stannis among them. Stannis did not want Dragonstone. They harp on this more in the books too, or I guess maybe they talk about it in the show, I can't remember, that Stannis, after Robert's rebellion, Stannis assumed that he would get Storm's End. And Robert was like, nah, I want you to stay in Dragonstone. And by all accounts, Dragonstone just sucks. Like, it's a castle on an island off the coast of Westeros, so it's not like there's a ton of amusement. It's not his ancestral home, it's Targaryen seat. And I think Stannis, like, that was, I think, the beginning of the rift between Stannis and Robert, or at least the big one, was that he was stationed there and not given Storm's End. Was Renly given Storm's End?
Renly was given Storm's End.
That's what I thought, yeah. I mean, obviously, that would piss me off, too.
Well, I mean, in Robert's defense, it's not like Stannis would have had more fun at Storm's End.
This is true.
Just because Stannis doesn't have more fun.
Stannis doesn't have fun.
No.
I don't... Oh, God. Again, like, this is just another... This is a moment where the depth of this character was really, unfortunately and unavoidably shortchanged by the show, because in the beginning of A Clash of Kings, our prologue is from Maester Cresson, who dies in the North Remembers. Melisandre poisons him. Poor well-intentioned Maester. Not great at poisoning people. Also, he has no idea what he's up against. I looked at him, I'm like, homie, no, she is 300 years old. If she's a day, you do not know what you're getting into. There's, like, blood magic surrounding her. We know this. We've seen. If she takes off that necklace, you'll see. But, like, please don't, but he does it anyway. And it's so funny, like, how lame that looks now. But what I was getting to is just the fact that Maester Cresson discusses how, like, Stannis and Robert watched their parents die, and Stannis was quiet and did not get the attention or nurturing that he needed after that, and it was just seemed very left alone and abandoned, and clearly couldn't relate to Renly. Robert just seems like a self-centered, selfish prick, to be honest, who doesn't he obviously
Robert is not deep.
Yeah, and he's, by all accounts, kind of like, just not a great guy. Like one of the, like a popular guy, but not a nice guy necessarily, unless it suited him. But anyway,
Robert strikes me as someone who could be nice but not kind.
Yeah, or not. I mean, I think it's tough. It's just sort of if you are that self-centered, if your entire life is about servicing you, then you can't really truly care about anybody else. And I think that's one of my favorite That's one of my favorite notions about Lyanna, that the story kind of slowly unravels or slowly presents, is that not only was she not in love with Robert, she was not convinced that he was really in love with her, which just even more so undermines the causes for Robert's rebellion and makes the whole thing, I'm like, Jesus, dude, you didn't even really love her. You didn't really know her.
But you hated losing.
You hated losing, and because it happened in such a, romantic tournament, medieval jousty way, it really served the narrative of
I'm gonna grab my hammer.
And I'm gonna beat
and
up.
I'm gonna kill this whole kingdom.
Yep. Kill these rapey, Bernie Targaryens. Oh shit, it worked. Okay, I think we can. Is there anything else? I also wrote down, I was like, remember when Renly's homosexuality was relevant? And Craster?
Remember when Renly was...
Yeah.
Craster.
Well, yeah, because there's even that moment, I want to say first or second season, between Loras and Craster. Loras and Craster.
Solving mysteries. This show has already been canceled.
Cancel culture exists for this show. Oh my goodness. There's a scene between Loras and Renly where Loras definitely manipulates and totally plays Lady Macbeth to Renly's Macbeth and pushes him to go for the Iron Throne, which I love you, Loras. I love you. You were probably such a blast to hang out with. I really wanted to see Sansa retire to Highgarden with you, where you guys could just be fashionistas together, and Sansa would eventually understand homosexuality and consider herself very lucky she didn't have to have sex. I really would have preferred that, but I really wish you had not emboldened Renly in this way.
Yeah.
Caused a lot of problems.
Honestly, I think what we learned in the first 3 seasons of first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, is that these kingdoms were fucked the minute any Baratheon got anywhere near the Iron Throne. It wouldn't have been any better under Renly, and it wouldn't have been any better under Stannis.
That's where I kind of differ a little bit. I think Renly would have been very similar to Robert and would have been very short-sighted and would have bankrupted the crown even more and would have been very easy to manipulate because he's so egotistical. Stannis, I think, was just so intractable that he couldn't be political.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like things would have... I feel like he probably would have,
he would have lasted... He would have done some things, but he would have lasted 5 years, and then Littlefinger would have Littlefingered him off the throne.
Yeah, because as much as
he'd
we
have gotten
love
the Balin Greyjoy treatment.
Yeah, I think Stannis is a much better, they always describe him this way, Stannis is a much better military commander than he is anything else. And that's good for winning wars. It's not great for running kingdoms, which we come to discover.
Yeah, Stannis would be an excellent administrator or actual hand of the king.
There's also a really... Yeah, actually, he would have been. But you kind of want your hand to be somebody you can get along with, you know what I mean?
Only if you watch The West Wing.
Okay, so something I do want to mention before we move on to Valor to Hyrus, the season 3 premiere, is that it begins with Cersei being taunted by Tyrion, who's now come in and assigned to be Hand of the King by their father. And Cersei, he waltzes into a small council meeting, and Cersei's like, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm in King's Landing. I came back from battle. I wanted to chill out and see my family." And she's like, "What are you doing in the room? Why are you at this meeting?" And it's just that funny early sibling humor before things passed the point of no return and 4 members of the Lannister family died, one of whom at Tyrion's hands directly and one of whom indirectly. He's like, "Oh, I'm here at the small council meeting because I'm Hand of the King." And she's like, "No, you're not." And he's like, "Dad said so." This great look into the Lannister family dynamic. And Cersei looks like an asshole. And we're so happy because Tyrion is a guy who deserves the power he's been given. He is smart enough. Yeah. He's smart enough to use it. He's kind enough to use it well. He has a strong enough sense of self that he doesn't mind it when people disagree with him or make fun of him. He is extremely confident, and he's not stupid. And he's made friends with Varys, which is, fucking job one. And it's like, and then as we move on to season 3, this was another like, oh my god, oh, your situation has drastically changed.
Yeah.
So season 3, Valor to Hyris, opens with the cold open. Is, if you remember at the end of season 2, the White Walkers, I'd completely forgotten about this, by the way, that the White Walkers surround the Fist of the First Men and attack the Night's Watch Brotherhood who's traveled north of the Wall. So it opens, the Wikipedia description is, some of the Night's Watchmen, including Tarly and J.R. Mormont, survived the White Walkers' attack and pledged to return to the Wall to warn the Seven Kingdoms. Snow is brought before Raider, Mance, the king before the Wall, and pledges his loyalty to the Wildlings. Also our first shot of Tormund. A scarred Tyrion tries to get Casterly Rock from Tywin, who promises other things instead. Marjorie engages in charity work with the orphans of King's Landing. Baelish offers to help Sansa escape King's Landing. Ros advises Shay not to trust him. Baelish offers help to Sansa to escape King's Landing. Ros advises Shay... Oh, sorry, I read that sentence twice. Davos is rescued by Salador San, who does not want any more connections with Stannis, and returns to Dragonstone, where he unsuccessfully tries to kill Melisandre, who blames him for convincing Stannis not to let her join the battle, and Davos is imprisoned. In Essos, Daenerys arrives at the city of Astapor to buy an army of brutally trained slave soldiers, the Unsullied, and the warlocks of Qarth attempt to assassinate her, but she is saved by Barristan Selmy, a former Kingsguard commander who pledges his loyalty.
Pop.
Yay, he's back. Who dispatched that Manticore like a champ.
Mm-hmm.
Not one of the show's finer visual effects moments. It really does look like some sort of like bug flower out of a Disney movie.
It's by the special effects team that brought you early Dobby in Harry Potter.
Yeah. So this episode, it's important to note, I think, begins with Tyrion waking up in his old chamber, in different chambers, and Cersei knocking on his door. And she taunts him because Dad's back in town. And so their positions are completely flipped. And as high as Tyrion was for most of season 2, he is brought so completely low in this particular episode, because not only is he disfigured, his father, he actually asks, he goes to Tywin and asks, which was probably a very difficult thing for him to do, goes to Tywin and asks for Casterly Rock, because Cersei is obviously otherwise engaged, and Jaime can never be Lord of Casterly Rock because he is a Kingsguard.
Right. And
Tywin is like, literally over my dead body. If you think for a minute I'm ever going to... if you think for a minute I'm giving you that, it's so unfair, because he says to him, it's like, I gave you real power and look what you did with it. And Tyrion's like, what the fuck? I
just saved the city.
Did a really good job.
Look at my face.
And it's just sort of, it's so interesting. Every scene I watch between the two of them feels like the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. But then there's like 54 more nails. I know, and I'm just like, oh god, this is so painful and dysfunctional. So, especially when he kills him. So,
yeah.
This is.
Speaking of people that don't really matter,
Mance Rayder.
Remember
how cool Mance Rayder was?
Yeah, Mance Rayder pretty much had a motorcycle.
Oh my, 100%. Kieran Hines is, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that name, but is a phenomenal actor and just another example of this show's brilliant casting. Mm-hmm. And because this was also season 3 when like things were heating up about the show. We're not talking Red Wedding level, but casting, I remember seeing that casting being like, that's kind of a get.
Getting our second Dario.
Oh yeah.
Mance Rayder, the entire Wildling rebellion is just so interesting, because of the fact that, on the one hand, Mance Rayder is entirely inconsequential, and he was one of the big threats for the first 3 seasons. But the wildlings remain incredibly important.
Yeah, well, through like one wildling.
No, when Hardhome.
Oh, true. Yeah, it's Mance is, and he's also a character that was much anticipated on the show because he's also very important in the books, and he's kind of cool. He's a bit of a. He almost feels a little bit like Lan the Clever to me, as the way Lan the Clever is characterized in mythology. It's just somebody who was very sneaky, and had his own brand of honor and his own brand of honesty, and. When we hear about Mance Rayder climbing over the wall and like secretly slipping into Winterfell to like play music and hang out, it's just he plays by his own rules, and there aren't a lot of people like that in Westeros who do it and aren't dicks about it. And I think that they captured that in the show pretty well, and it is crazy to me to watch it because you watch his introduction scene with Jon, and there's so much gravitas to it. And Jon seems he's such a baby boy. And he kneels down in front of he thinks it's Tormund at first, so he kneels down in front of him and he's like, "I'm here to serve you, your grace." And they all start laughing at him, and he gets so self-conscious. Time has passed.
Yeah, you forget that Jon Snow at this point is like 7 years old.
Yeah.
In the series that never was, just conflict between Ned Stark and Mance Rayder would have been really interesting. Like actual conflict of them going to war, of Mance's invasion of the North.
Well, that's what's interesting is because you get the feeling that I kind of wish Mance had been a little bit more upfront about his overall mission from the beginning with Jon. Because I think Jon would have done a lot more to help him if Mance was like, "Dude, there are creatures coming. I'm bringing these people south so they can be safe. Yeah, I'm not trying to attack you because I want to have dominance over you. I just simply want to live there, and we refuse to bend the knee, so we're doing this aggressively because we don't want to get under them and then just become citizens of your kingdoms." Which, if safety is of primary concern, is of paramount concern, then maybe he should have loosened up a little bit on the bending of the knee thing. But it's neither here nor there.
Nope. It all worked out, except for, for him.
Oh, you know who else is in the first part of season 3? Ghost.
Oh.
Been gone for so long.
Yeah. Just because it's expensive.
We have a GoFundMe for Ghost. For Ghost's VFX. Like, just one scene with Ghost. $60,000 million.
Another actor that obviously made it big. I think he was in Aquaman. And that's why it's so expensive.
That's true. That's
why we're not seeing him.
He was a key part of the underwater battle.
Yep, they'd have to Photoshop off of his mustache, just like Henry Cavill.
Oh my god.
It'd be rough.
What happened there? Like
Warner Brothers lost a bet, and we got the DCU. Angry letters to GoThronesPodcast@gmail.com.
Oh my god, no, I'm sorry, just like that to me, the Photoshop, the CGI'd out mustache in Justice League is the DCEU in a nutshell. Like, we're gonna get this over the finish line by hell or high water, and we refuse to speak for its quality. Like, the amount of money that they poured into that film, into the special effects, and you got Henry Cavill out there just looking like a dope.
And then they take the lamest character in the DCEU at that point in time, and it blows China out of the water and is just amazingly well received.
Oh,
and
Aquaman?
It's the guy who rides dolphins' skis. I haven't seen Shazam.
Oh, Shazam is great. I don't think it's going to make as much money as Aquaman did, just because it's not as flashy.
It's not as flat. It's guys, I'm a nerd. you can stop listening now. I subscribe to the box office subreddit, and I'm in a fantasy box office league.
Shut the fuck up. I didn't even know that was a thing.
It's so nerdy. But Shazam's doing pretty well domestically and not as great overseas. But it was also really cheap for a superhero movie. So it's gonna do well enough to make Warner Brothers happy. But they made a good, affordable DCEU movie and released it 3 weeks before Endgame. And it's gonna just I don't get it. And
I think Shazam's gonna stand on its own. I honestly do. It's so different. It's got such a unique feel to it, and it just feels more like it feels like a unique kind of superhero movie, because right now basically all that we've had stuffed down our gullets, and not that I mind it, it's a steady diet of fun goodness, but is, you know, these hyper CGI'd or hyper VFX laden movies that are just on such a massive scale, and they all kind of look the same. They have the same tone with dialogue, whereas this is just a very unique little film. And in terms of all of those, in terms of the DCEU and the MCU, I'm happy. I don't know how the fuck Warner Brothers made it. It given their track record, it just doesn't feel like their kind of film.
Yeah,
I'm happy.
Which is probably why it's successful artistically. I really don't like the DCEU. Well, no, Wonder Woman is great. Aquaman did
Wonder Woman
really
is
well.
Better than most of the rest of it, but I maintain Wonder Woman was so overly sentimental in a lot of ways. But
Wonder Woman defied expectations.
Yeah,
How
that's
about
for
that?
sure. That's for sure. I'm gonna get angry letters now. I said a bad word about Wonder Woman. But okay, so I think
obviously that's all we had to say about Ballad of Paris.
This one did not. This one kind of feels we had like season 2 left us on a pretty major cliffhanger, and less so in the case of Daenerys, but in the case of Sam and the Night's Watchman, definitely. So this definitely felt like a follow up to Blackwater.
I was going to say it also was Blackwater was the first time. No, that's not true, because Baelor. I was going to say it's the first time they did a penultimate what the fuck episode. But Baelor was also a what the fuck episode. So disregard.
This is the first time that we meet Missandei and Grey Worm, because they are in Ostapor with Krasny Monocross, whose name I only know because I have seen Battle of the Bastards 80 times. You will take the try and sell it you stole from Krasny Monocross will return to be sold at the highest bidder. Okay, I'm done. This is the first time she buys an army, essentially, and she just hates every second of it. Like, Krasny Monocross is a disgusting person. He could not be more odious. He cuts off some dude's nipple in front of her to show her how well they can withstand pain, and he tells her that they have to go and kill a child. They have to go take a slave woman's baby to prove that they're emotionless. The Unsullied have to go take a slave woman's baby and kill the baby.
Yeah.
And Daenerys is horrified, and it sort of grounds down, and she also speaks High Valyrian, so she's hearing everything he's saying that is insulting her left and right. So I feel like one of the first this is like the sort of season 3 and season 4 when we really, because season 3 I think ends with Misa, that episode. And this is sort of where we see her like insane commitment to freeing slaves, which I feel like we've gotten away from a little bit, because in seasons 6 and 7, obviously she's freed the slaves and now she's on mission.
Yeah. In the books, I don't recall if they tell the kill a baby story. Don't they raise puppies and then kill them?
I feel like that's a Navy SEAL urban legend that I've heard, but I don't remember from the books. I'd have to look that up. One thing I also made note of was that first shot we get of Davos when he's on the rock, and he looks up and you see his hand with the fingers reflect like is backlit by the sun, and he sees a boat and he waves them down, and he has no idea who won the battle at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And the boat comes and they're like, "Who are you loyal to?" And he says, not knowing who's there. He immediately says Stannis Baratheon, the one true King Stannis Baratheon. And I thought, what a great snapshot of Davos right there, is that he is, even when faced with possible death or when faced with survival, he remains that loyal.
Yeah.
He could have just been like, I don't know.
I don't know. Who won?
Yeah. Who do you think I'm with?
I'm loyal to the king.
Pop quiz hotshot.
King Baratheon.
King Bob.
Gruffness. Stand free.
Oh, stand free.
Stanley Baratheon is the Millhouse of Westeros.
100%. Oh my god, Sam Tarly should have been Stanfrey Tarly. Like, his dad was away when his mom named him, came back, like, you've got to be kidding me. It's too late, he answers to it.
Why couldn't you name him something manly like Dickon?
Because it was on the nose, darling. It was a little too on the nose. Like, you just wait. It'll make him really popular.
Yeah.
Dickon Tarly. Anyway, so... And then also, so this is when Robb and Catelyn suffering their first major loss, I believe. I forget what castle they go to. It's not the Dreadfort. It might be Harrenhal. But they get to a castle and everyone is dead skis, just dead, dead as a doornail, except for Maester Qyburn. And
then it was Harrenhal.
Yeah, because eventually they're chased out, and yeah, okay, so cool. So Maester Qyburn is there, and Talisa is also there, and she nurses him back to health, and her liberal bullshit eventually gets Robb killed.
Yeah, I forgot about Talisa.
No, I was so close, and then I saw her again, and I got very angry.
So season 2, they made a lot of They adapted a lot of things really well. Season 3, we got Talisa.
Yep.
Instead of Jane Poole.
Yep.
Jane Poole, who would have had really interesting family dynamics.
I've known Robb since he was a boy. I should be loyal to him, but my mom doesn't think this marriage is going to last, so she's feeding me moon blood, which is
moon tea,
which
which is the plan B of Westeros.
Exactly.
But instead we got Talisa,
this woman
who is I think I'm overplaying how interesting she is.
And that's the thing, like, Talisa is just, like, it's clearly someone's idea of sort of a perfect woman for Robb, but she's
almost a manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah, she doesn't exist in Westeros. She wouldn't have been allowed to exist in Westeros or Essos, because I know she's from the East, and it kind of makes sense that Robb would fall for her and that it would be so destructive, because she's sort of another example of the type of person who can't survive in this type of brutal political system. You can't save everybody. You can't be a pacifist. You will just die. And Robb and Talisa think that the power of their true love can overcome obstacles and overcome mountains, and everyone around them is far more pragmatic. And that is eventually... We had this discussion, I think, in a
We've had this discussion like 18 times.
Well, earlier this week, I watched a video that was a kind of a Thrones recap, and they were talking about how they were crediting the Red Wedding to some other event that wasn't Robb's putting over Walder Frey. That I don't know, I forget exactly, but that it made me remember that, like, oh yeah, that's exactly when this happens. Is when Walder is when it's their marriage that causes Walder Frey to be amenable to Tywin's offer.
Yeah.
And eventually, and obviously Roose goes with the winning team. So
I feel like my problem with Talisa, as opposed, is that for the most part, the characters that we were introduced to through George R.R. Martin are not fantasy tropes. And when they are, they break that expectation.
Yeah, eventually.
George R. R. Martin. Ned Stark is a fantasy trope of the honorable Lord hero that dies. Like, he's killed. He's the hero of this series of books, and he's killed off right away. And Talisa is just I exist to be the shoulder for our hero to cry on. And that is my only purpose as a character.
I think also too, one of the, it's so frustrating because I think they needed to give Robb more of an inner life because he doesn't have he's not a POV character in the book. So but he is major. And I love watching back. I think Richard Madden is so talented, and it was great watching him become this man because you were rooting for him and he did so well for so long. And it's just, she just felt so, we could have had that with Jane Poole, and it could have been way more complicated and frustrating and weird and strange and neat. But no, we have this 21st century woman who, is everybody's friend and doesn't have an ounce of meanness in her. Just,
she's the girl from Outlander.
Yeah, it's just she just doesn't fit in with this series at all. And
this isn't a knock on the actress.
No, she's Una Chaplin. Una Chaplin's great. Like, she's in one of my favorite episodes of Black Mirror. But it's just annoying. It's clearly nothing George would have ever written, and this is still when they were very well steeped in his material. So I get it. Like, I also worry that they created a new character so they could kill her, and so they could make the Red Wedding even more brutal by stabbing a pregnant woman in the pregnancy, like in the pregnant.
That's the name of my first album.
Pregnancy in the Pregnant. We also get that great scene between Roz and Shay where Roz is like, look out for her with him. And Roz does make it through this season, if you'll recall.
Yeah. Roz is... Roz. Roz is a character that we met that was introduced in the series, was an amalgamation.
Amalgam, yeah.
There we go. That's a word. Of multiple whores. And
Roz, I take that as a compliment. Thank you.
But I think Roz was great.
Yeah, Esme, I forget her last name. The actress is, in particular, just stunning to look at. I just love looking at her face. First, I just find her so gorgeous, and we root for her too because she's from Winterfell. Like, she slept with Theon, so she's kind of our early universe blend character of somebody who pops down from Winterfell and has interactions with the king and has interactions with Shay and all these disparate people when everybody is still pretty scattered, when there's still the Stark diaspora is kind of at its zenith, and all of the storylines are all over the place, all over the world, and there's so many of them. It's kind of Roz always to me was sort of this fun, like, oh, she's from Winterfell, like she's from the north. We should we literally have 4 more season premieres to discuss, so we gotta kick it up.
We should move more quickly.
All right. Two Swords.
Season 4, episode 1. Two Swords. Tywin oversees the reforging of Ice, the Stark ancestral sword, into 2 new swords, one for Jaime, who tries to deal with the loss of his sword hand and Cersei's love, and one for King Joffrey as a wedding present that is a sword. Prince Oberyn Martell, on behalf of his brother, Prince Duran of Dorne, arrives in King's Landing with his paramour, Ellaria Sand, to attend the royal wedding and is welcomed by Tyrion. Oberyn openly reveals his motive for his visit, revenge against the Lannisters for the rape and murder of his sister, Elia, wife of Prince Rhaegar. In the north, While Styr and his group of cannibal Thens reinforce Tormund, Ygritte, and the other wildlings, Jon is released by Maester Aemon after confessing what he did during his time with the wildlings to gain information. In the Riverlands, Arya and the Hound reclaim her sword, Needle, from Polliver, killing him and his men. In Essos, Daenerys leads her army on a march towards Meereen, the last of the great slave cities, though she is troubled by how her dragons are becoming less tame as they grow.
So
there were actually 3 swords and 2 swords. 4 swords if you count ice. Worst episode ever.
I think that I really want to call out some subtext in this description because it just tickled me to pieces. Jon is released by Maester Aemon after confessing, quote, what he did during his time with the wildlings to, quote, gain information. That was supposed to be striptease music. Jon boned a wildling princess, which I have to believe he's honestly more upset about than killing Qhorin Halfhand.
Yeah.
Straight up. That's the Night's Watch is more concerned with his murder, his killing of Qhorin Halfhand than, but I'm pretty sure Jon is more concerned with the fact that he lost his virginity.
Literally invented cunnilingus.
Yeah. Also a point of order. I find it very suspect that Jon would be that good at that the first time around, but also it was Ygritte's first time receiving it, which just breaks my heart for all of the wildling women. So maybe she's not a great judge, but that was one of my favorite moments in season 3 when she looks. They had such great they were such a good comedy duo.
Yeah, they had great chemistry. I wonder if they ever,
it is really cute that they're married. Yeah. I think that
she actually owns a castle.
I know. But before we get off topic already, this episode, watching it's like they play the Reigns of Castamere in this episode. It is like it's very, this whole thing is very triggering. It opens with Tywin reforging ice, which is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes it into 2 new swords. And then I don't know if this is Robb's direwolf, if this is Grey Wind's skin, but he burns a wolf pelt.
Yes, that's Grey Worm.
Okay, Grey Wind.
Great. Yes, that's not Grey Worm.
Those are too similar.
Yeah, I have never thought about that until just now.
Neither have I. Do you think that somebody's going to meet Grey Worm at Winterfell and be like, hey,
Grey Wind.
Oh, God, now I'm sad.
No.
So it's really, it's so effective and it's so upsetting that Tywin is doing that he's just, they are underscoring his villainy. He almost looks like he's Satan because he's kind of shot within these flames and he's burning everything. It is driving home the point of the Red Wedding and driving home that event even more and driving home his masterminding of it. And it's also, I think that's so important because we're immediately told there's going to be we are fully in uncharted territory here as a narrative. There's going to be no immediate response or turning a corner for the forces of good such as they are.
Bran's not gonna show up and lead the forces of the North to victory.
Yeah. It's going to take a long time for them to bounce back from this, and especially when the show is giving us so many examples of the Lannisters just dancing on the graves of everyone they've murdered. Shamelessly murdered. And then also we get, and I didn't realize, this was something watching too, I didn't realize that we only had Oberyn for 1 season.
Yeah.
9 episodes.
Yeah.
That is insane to me.
And another one of the amazing casting moments.
Oh, yeah. Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss.
It also, Arya's arc is a lot slower than you think of it.
How do you mean?
This is the beginning of season 4, and she's still in Westeros.
Yeah, it's true that she only spends thank God, the 1 season at the House of Black and White. Or is it? No, it's 2 seasons.
It's 2 seasons.
Yeah, she comes back. Sorry, pardon me. Everything feels so long ago. Yeah, but Arya has progressed. It's so interesting going back and seeing this is brilliant characterization and how they've grown these characters. Dany is so much more vulnerable in different ways in the early seasons, obviously, and she is a full conqueror. any full queen and who rarely, if ever, shows weakness now.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of openly does it in those early days before she has, 50 armies and has to rule.
Yeah.
Everyone's just a grown up. Like, we really have seen that progression, and it's kind of incredible to watch because it feels very fluid and it feels very organic. That these people that we knew as children have all left those people behind.
Mm-hmm.
Even Melisandre.
Yeah.
I know. Also, this was also the beginning of my favorite Arya season because I loved her stuff with the Hound and how like it was so kind of almost like Brecht's not the right. Who's the guy waiting for Godot? Is that Brecht?
No, that was wow.
Oh God.
We're
fired.
English major and theater major here. It wasn't Stoppard. It was it Brecht? No, it was Beckett. It was Samuel Beckett.
There, yep. Samuel. Oh, gosh,
yeah, we are so fired.
I have acted at a Beckett play, and it's oof. Anyway, it's very, their whole arc is just feels like something Beckett wrote. It's just very philosophical, for lack of a better word, I guess.
It's educational for Arya.
Yeah. And it's very it's her, like, it's people who have nothing to do but to essentially they know where they're going. Their way is pretty unobstructed. They have nothing to do but to sort of swap philosophies and argue a lot of the foundational moral conflicts that the show addresses and the show attacks. And like, how do you live your life? Do you live it like, what's the best way to live your life? Are you going to just kind of look at the facts on the ground like the Hound does and try to survive and try to survive the best you can when you already, if that means stealing from people will not survive the winter or whatever's coming, then you do, and you don't worry about morals because nobody likes each other and you can't trust anyone. It's very individualistic. Or do you behave like Arya, who insists that there is a point to treating people with some kindness and some honesty because she's Ned Stark's daughter?
Mm-hmm.
And you see her kind of come out of that at the end of the fourth season after the confrontation with Brienne, much more
harder.
Yeah, and much more contemplative and not as what her time with the Hound really, really shapes her and the person that she becomes going into the House of Black and White. And I think the person she becomes, like, that makes her able eventually to kill the waif is, to kill the waif like she does. Anyway, I think we should scoot on to the worst to
season
come.
5.
Yeah. Basically, like, this is season 5, the worst to come. In a flashback, a witch tells a teenage Cersei that someone younger and more beautiful than herself will one day steal her accomplishments. In the present, Tywin is buried and Lancel returns, now a devoutly religious man and a member of the Sparrows. In Pentos, a despondent Tyrion agrees to accompany Varys to Meereen to support Daenerys' claim on the Iron Throne. In Meereen, the insurgent sons of the Harpy murder an Unsullied, forcing Daenerys to launch more restrictive measures about respecting the old traditions. Missandei gets suspicious when she realizes that the Unsullied visit brothels. Daenerys' locked-away dragons attack her when she checks on them. In the Vale, Baelish puts Robin in the care of House Royce and leaves with Sansa. At the Wall, Stannis seeks to enlist the wildlings in his war against Bruce. Jon Snow is unable to convince Rhaegar to accept Stannis' authority when the latter has a mance burned alive. Jon Snow ends his suffering with an arrow to the heart.
In California, Alexander August starts a podcast. Johnny agrees to guest host for an episode or two.
Oh, that's right, 2015. We were babies. This is around the time that I got to be in my bonnet about doing a little podcast called God Thrones, and Johnny immediately said yes when I asked him to join me on Facebook.
Yeah, every once in for an episode or two.
Yeah, just for an episode or two. And I did not realize how lucky I got in having somebody, such a consistent host, because I have seen many friends attempt to start podcasts with friends as like I've seen this in my just social group, and it almost never works out because trying to wrangle two people's schedules in Los Angeles is fucking just impossible.
Yeah. Secret find somebody not in Los Angeles.
Yep. So this was that sort of key flashback we get. I feel like this is sort of when Cersei, with this flashback with the woman who's Maggie the Frog in the books, but not named in the show. Clearly a Milk of the Poppy user.
Yeah.
Which was a joke we made then, and a joke I will continue to make because it is funny. I feel like this was notably the only flashback we've ever gotten in Game of Thrones, aside from Bran's visits to the past, which I don't really count, but
because those are
they're not flashbacks.
Present. Yeah, they're visions.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I feel like it's significant because at this point, only one of Cersei's children is dead. Mm-hmm. The other two are still alive. And this is, I think, where she turns a corner, because this is the season that the Faith Militant rise to power. This is the season where she gets her walk of shame. This is the season where Myrcella dies, even though she doesn't know it until season 6. And I feel like that, if you look at each season premiere and like the ways or each season premiere and what happens, there's usually something really portentous about that season, as a lot of season premieres for any shows will do. They really set the tone for what's to follow. And I thought this sequence with the witch and Cersei, and then Cersei looking up and, coming back to the present, she's at Tywin's funeral and she's in her dress, and like it's interesting because she starts the season going into the Sept and she ends the season leaving it. Mm-hmm. Covered in dirty food and naked,
and yep, covered in dirty food and not much else, and poo.
Yeah, and so she's in an incredibly powerful position at this point, but at the end of the season, all of that is completely ripped out from under her.
Yep,
in a pretty horrible way. And I didn't really appreciate her hatred of Tyrion after Tywin's death until season 7, The Dragon and the Wolf, when they share that scene together, which was like, gave me chills. They share that scene in the Red Keep, and she tells him, "You killed him. You left us open. You left us weak." And then that just made me think, as much as she didn't get along with her father, he still always solved these problems, and he was still her protector. And it just made me think of her in the cells, in the Sept, being held there, and probably just wishing desperately for her father to come save her, and knowing that would never happen.
Yeah, that's a good take.
She's horrible, but I still have. I mean, there's a reason Cersei is such a dynamic and engaging character, is because it is possible to have great sympathy for her.
Right, and still realize that she made every wrong decision ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens when you deny someone agency for their entire life. And force them to suppress every trauma that they've dealt with. They don't always turn out right. They don't always turn out so nice. It's also
sometimes. Oh, never mind. Bad joke.
I think it was really also somebody who has varied in importance throughout the seasons is Robb and Arryn.
Yeah.
And this was hilarious. Just this scene between Robar Royce, Sansa, and Peter Baelish as they watch Robb and Arryn just get his ass kicked by a 13-year-old who is exactly his size. And Baelish is like, he's young, and Robar's like, he's 13. There are kids who go to battle at 13. He holds a sword like a woman, like a small child with palsy. And both Sansa and Baelish are do a double take at him because he's so harsh. It's just, I like Robar Royce. He's honest, not political at all. And they even Baelish is like,
but in a way that's
fostering.
Much more likable.
Oh yeah, very much so. He's not Stannis.
No.
But I love the way he calls. I love the way that he, even as Baelish is leaving, is like, "Well, thank you for fostering him. I look forward to his skills improving. I look forward to seeing his skills have improved when I get back." And even then, that was supposed to be a compliment to Royce, I think, just kind of bolstering Royce's confidence in his own abilities. And Royce, even then, is like, "Oh, he'll be here. I can't speak for his skills, though." And Baelish just walks away.
Robar
calls him as he sees him.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in things that absolutely don't matter, we've got the Sons of the Harpy.
I just realized we never found out who the Harpy was.
It's okay, because we never cared.
I really didn't. I feel like this is also an excellent adaptation of the books because Marine
because
fucking
we
sucks.
Didn't care.
Yeah, because I don't care about this city at all. And Dany is just biding her time.
Yeah, as are we.
Kind of... Oh, go on.
It's the Myronese knot. It's the George doesn't know what to do with Daenerys because if he had it all to do over again, he would have introduced her in book 2.
And I will say though, like, I like the idea of her sticking around in Meereen because she needs to learn how to be a queen. That the effect of keeping her there and learning about Meereen, and like the keeping her in Meereen for a while, I think makes a lot of sense because I really I was never going to buy that Daenerys would just travel around picking up armies and then go conquer Westeros and would have been any better at sitting the Iron Throne than Robert Baratheon or her father or any of the other undeserved and unpracticed rulers that have sat that chair before. So it really works for me that she's in Meereen doing all of this, but I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Like, the dragons, the most exciting part about her is the dragons, and they're locked up.
And they don't even like her this season.
No. They're like, get out! We did not agree to film! Turn off those cameras! Get out of our lair!
Mom, get out of my room!
Yeah, that's essentially, they breathe fire at her. That's effectively, these are dragon teenage years. So,
that pit's gotta smell so bad.
Yeah. Oh my god. Do you remember the monkey pit, the monkey house in the Toledo Zoo?
I was just thinking about any teenage boy's room.
Yes, that's true. But add to that, like, charred rancid meat.
Yep.
And then
it depends on the room.
This was another. I feel like this was a really big growth. This is one of the first times I feel like we see the political kind of honorable Jon that we're used to now in later seasons. It's after Ygritte's died. He talks to, he is a savvy negotiator with Stannis. He's unintimidated by him. So you're seeing sort of the weight of the age and what he's experienced in him. And he understands, like, he is not afraid to speak truth to power, in the sense that when Stannis asks him why he's so preoccupied with the wildlings, Jon just states the fact, he was like, they were born on the wrong side of the wall. It doesn't make them monsters. And it just seems, and he's also, both of them are fairly pragmatic about the situation, that they need living people to fight this war, and this is the important one. And here you see Stannis, who's feeling himself because he's made these because he's got an army and he's got a recent victory, and he feels like he's gonna take back Winterfell, and
and just keep going south.
Yep. And it's like, homie, you are still like, I remember I watched this moment and I was just like, why? Like, I really wish you would.
When victory doesn't make a conqueror.
Yeah. Well, also just that, like, I really wish in that moment he had just, like, left his ego at the door and left that, because I think a lot of it is about ego for Stannis, despite what he says. And I think that, you know, he wanted to be the Winterfell savior, and nobody fucking listened to Jon. And was like, maybe we could just take our armies and turn them north, and not, like, this is what's happening south of the wall is not important. And I really just wished in that moment, because I do like Stannis, I really wish that had been where that conversation had gone. I mean, we would not have my favorite episode of all time in that case, but yeah. And it's really one. I love that last conversation between Mance Rayder and Jon, where Mance is like, the only thing you're offering me is to live, but giving up the one thing I've been fighting for my entire life, which is the freedom to live my life the way I want to. So he dies. And Jon kills him before he gets burned. Oh, man.
Yeah. Which probably ends up killing Shireen.
Yep. And in the books, it's not Mance Rayder, though. It's the Lord of Bones, who's been glamored by Melisandre.
Yep.
I'm not mad that didn't make it into the show, but I do like that it's in the books, because I like Mance Rayder.
Yeah.
What a fucking dope name. Like, nobody uncool has ever been called Mance Rayder.
No. Mance Rayder, like, my headcanon is that Mance Rayder is a character that exists when George R. R. Martin was writing Mad Max fan fiction. And he just
absolutely drives
kept the
ATV.
character around. Didn't change him much.
Got rid of the goggles, got rid of the ATV.
Yeah. Kept the leather.
Kept the leather. And then with that, I think we should
move on to season 6.
Let me see if I wrote any. Oh, there's also Jon training Ollie. This is after the battle for Castle Black, where Ollie kills his girlfriend, and Jon says, "I'll keep your shield up, or I'll ring your head like a bell," which is something that Ned says to Benjen in a flashback, in one of Bran's flashbacks in season 6, and I think that's right. I feel like that's even referenced in the books, as it's just a really familiar line, which is kind of a fun thing. Okay, and with that, I think that can take us to season 6.
Season 6, The Red Woman. Jon Snow's corpse is found by Ser Davos, Ed, and a few other loyalists. Davos and the others take him inside and lock themselves behind a door with him, while Ed goes to get help. Thorne assumes command of the Watch. At Winterfell, Ramsay mourns for Miranda, while Sansa and Theon escape through the woods. Ramsay's men catch up with them and are about to take them captive when Brienne and Pod arrive, kill the men, and the former is accepted into Sansa's service. In King's Landing, Cersei receives Jaime, who arrives with Myrcella's body. Jaime promises Cersei they will take their revenge. Obara and Nymeria murder Trystane on his way home from King's Landing, while in Sunspear, Duran Duran and Arya Hota are killed by Ellaria and Tyenn after the former learns of Myrcella's death. In Meereen, Tyrion and Varys find all the ships burning in the harbor. Jorah and Daario continue to track Daenerys, who is taken by the Dothraki to Khal Moro. In Braavos, Arya lives on the street as a beggar, where she is beaten by the waif. In her chamber, Melisandre removes her bejeweled necklace as she reveals her true appearance as an old crone. On this podcast, Alexandra is convinced that Stannis is still alive.
100% convinced. Could not be dissuaded. Narrator, she was wrong. Utterly convinced. Yeah, this was, I feel like, you kind of underestimate, just because I think people really didn't like season 5 that much, the paradigm shift that happens. Like, so, like, Sansa and Theon escape Ramsay. Ramsay has been, I believe, Theon's captor since season 3?
Yeah.
So, Sansa has suffered just an astonishing level of trauma. Is a completely different person. And Jon is fucking dead.
Yeah.
Which was the most pointless cliffhanger plot development I've ever been on the show. But it's a big deal for the next 2 episodes.
It's also where we left Jon.
Yep.
In the books, Jon is still dead.
Yeah, officially in the books, Jon might not come back, guys.
Yeah.
Might not. If he
they
does,
might have been rolling their own stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if George R. R. Martin also did not have a way to make Jon's death more momentous other than just a big cliffhanger, and that's what's holding up the Winds of Winter.
Wait. They brought him back? That's a great idea.
That's an awesome idea.
Got it.
And then they just ignore it for the rest of this.
In 5 years.
And then they just ignore it for the rest of the series. This is great. Oh, yeah. I just got myself out of this.
Yeah.
I love, this is also when Brienne and Pod arrive and Sansa knights Brienne, and it's just so, we see Brienne finally complete one of her half her mission.
Yep. We
see people finally escape from Ramsay. Dorne is tied up in a nice little bow. And Daenerys is gone, and Tyrion is in Essos ruling in her stead, while Jorah and Daario bromance their way into finding her.
Yep. In the books, they track her with her diarrhea.
Oh, God.
I'm glad that we didn't get nearly as much cholera in the series.
Yep. Martin was like, okay, well, if I have to be here, if I have to be miserable, you all have to be miserable. Here's Meereen. Yeah,
here's Meereen. Here's all the feces.
And then all of it. I remember watching this episode and thinking to myself, because the scene with Melisandre was kind of pointless, I guess, or just sort of seemed not pointless, but seemed. We all knew she didn't really look like that. We all I always felt in the back of my mind, I'm like, she really smells like, to me, like a crone who's pretending to be a hot lady. That seems like her brand of witch. And that it seemed almost extraneous or superfluous that they revealed that, if only just to tell us that shit was going to get weird this season, that this season was going to go places that we really didn't expect it to, and things were really heating up. And season 6, shit heats up.
I'll agree. I will say, and this has been something I've been harping on since 2017, 2016, whatever year that was. Dorne was a waste.
Heartbreaking waste.
Yeah.
Poor Arryn. I refuse to believe that tiny knife made it through his clothing and what I would imagine to be a pretty thick hide to actually kill him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought at least, I mean, Dorne was not a total waste in the sense that we get a wonderful death scene with Ilaria and Obara.
Yes.
Next season.
Next season. But first we get bad pussy.
Yep. Well, no, that was
last season.
That was season 5, yeah. Anyway, so I think also too, this is the last time for me that the Lannisters were sort of the center of this sort of like really dysfunctional, kind of almost funny family dynamic. That's, you know, their family dynamic kind of mirrors the toxic politics of that govern Westeros and are at work in King's Landing. So they're very representative of that southern culture. Mm-hmm. Whereas at this point, they are just completely laid bare and broken, and you almost see the Lannister family growing up just in a much more tragic way, in a much more haunted way. And you really, again, this is another moment where we feel a lot of intense sympathy for Cersei, because again, her like one redeeming quality is that she loves her kids, and she is expecting Myrcella to be alive when she comes back, and she's very excited to see her because obviously Cersei's had a bad couple of weeks.
Yeah,
and. At
this point in time, we still have Tommen.
At this point in time. Man, this season claimed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Well, it also gave us two of what are arguably the best episodes of the series, which are Battle of the Bastards and The Winds of Winter. Or, yeah, The Winds of Winter, which brought us that phenomenal piece by Ramin Djawadi.
Yeah.
That I still listen to occasionally, and it was just sort of a perfect follow-up to that singular battle episode in Battle of the Bastards, and follows it up with, again, this sort of brilliant realpolitik of King's Landing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just season 6 was, I think, for a lot of people who really despised season 5, season 6 was a brilliant follow-up.
I think it had its hits and misses. I still think that from a dialogue, from a strict writing perspective of dialogue, when they were spending, when they had more than George's paint by numbers to work with, I think they were just able to, maybe it was just spend more time getting, or they had dialogue to improve as opposed to create.
There's a marked difference between season 5 and season 6 in terms of the complexity of stories.
Yep.
And like I remember specifically scenes from the early seasons that I was like, oh my God, I just want to go back and watch that again because these two people are so good. There's not a single scene that I can call back to in season 6 and season 7. Like a scene where it's dialogue based and it's two actors going back and forth, and it's not laden with crazy stakes like a dead body or
tell Cersei I know, or drinking poison.
Yeah, like even Beyond the Wall, where we had that sort of casual dialogue between these guys. Nobody mentions Arya, which would have been interesting. And we get this kind of pointless banter between, I don't understand, I was just watching it the other day, I don't understand why Thoros didn't die with the bear. Like, I get that we got the fun line with, I just got bit by a dead bear, you did, funny old life, and he gets up and then he walks for another day, talks to Jorah about being wasted when he ran through the beach on Pike with his flaming sword, and then dies of hypothermia. I don't understand why, as much as I like Thoros and his death was sad, like, of course he died of hypothermia. He wasn't going to survive. Did anybody think a drunk was going to survive a freezing night after he'd been bitten in the chest and was probably suffering from internal bleeding? Like, It was, and like, so, but that's the conversation we got. And when you think back to season 1, that wonderful, brilliant scene between Cersei and Robert, or in season 3 between Arya and Tywin, it's just
2.
Oh, 2 is Arya and Tywin?
I think so.
Oh, sorry, guys.
One of us is wrong.
There is an absolutely, there's just no comparison. Like, these guys, I think David and Dan are phenomenal at production value. And I think they've run the show really well, but there's no question that without George's work to back this up, this is a very different show.
Mm-hmm.
And also too, like, everything's thinning out a little bit. We should also point out, like, I think it's important to point out that, like, as there become less people on the show, the conversations get a little bit more pointed and a little bit less complex because, you know, we're just dealing with more direct threats. The politics of things are getting thinned out a little bit.
They're killing interesting people.
Yeah. Like without Baelish around, everybody's honest. So there's not that sort of fun wordplay like between him and Varys or even him and Ned. Just stuff like that. But Baelish is still around at this point. Season 7, our penultimate season premiere.
Yeah.
Dragonstone. At the Twins, the remaining lords of House Frey are poisoned by Arya, disguised as Walder Frey. The White Walkers march toward the wall, where Tallet allows Bran and Mira inside. At Winterfell, despite Sansa's disapproval, Jon secures the loyalties of Houses Umber and Karstark, who fought alongside Ramsay in the Battle of the Bastards. At the Citadel, Samwell steals books that reveal a large reservoir of dragonglass in Dragonstone and sends word to Jon. He later finds Jorah in a cell. In the Riverlands, Arya meets a group of friendly Lannister soldiers who take... who was the singer?
Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, Arya meets Ed Sheeran, who's got this, singing a song. Meets a group of friendly Lannister soldiers who take her intention to kill Cersei as a joke. Thoros shows Sandor a vision in the fire. The revelation leads him to believe in the Lord of Light. Does it? In King's Landing, Jaime tells Cersei of their crucial need for allies. She welcomes Euron, who proposes marriage to her in exchange for his Iron Fleet and a chance to kill Theon and Yara. Cersei declines, citing trust as a concern, so Euron promises to return with a, quote, gift to prove his loyalty. Dany arrives at Dragonstone, the home of House Targaryen, once occupied by Stannis with her army and dragons, which is arguably my favorite moment in that episode.
I don't think that's arguable.
Yeah, that's...
The only other option would, in my opinion, be Arya doing the Mission Impossible.
Wait, what do you mean?
Pulling Walters. It's the first time we actually saw her take a face off.
Yeah. I forget. Yeah, I actually just conflated that with when she actually kills him.
Oh, maybe.
No. It's like this is what she kills him at the end of season 6.
Yeah.
And in season 7, that's when he comes back again, and you're like, wait, what?
Yep.
Oh, that's strange. This is also Bran and Mira get south of the wall, and Sansa and Jon are at Winterfell. It just feels like a totally new show because everyone is back together, but they're all so different. Like Sansa and Jon have a completely different relationship than they would have had. You know, it's sort of like it's literally what happened is all of the elements of the first episode get like thrown into a blender and twisted up, and what comes out they're still the same people. But
are a bunch of broken people.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of amazed at the progression. Like, looking at this show as a retrospective will just amaze you in the character progression that's happened. At least that was kind of my biggest takeaway, was like, wow, have we come a long way. In a way that still feels like a very complete story, not like a show that's just been on for 10 seasons like Grey's Anatomy or something, where everyone's come a long way, but you get the sense that they're coming a long way because they don't have any other choice, because the writers are just going to keep going. Whereas this feels like the story, their progression was very intentional, because they were working off of George's books for a long time. But
yeah.
Sorry, I was.
I miss Sam at the Citadel. He would have done so well.
Somebody pointed out that they did not need, I forget who it was, it might have been Chloe Ketchum, Leisenarber, on Twitter, pointed out that, like, we did not need a montage of Citadel shit. Like, how, like, it wasn't Chloe, it was somebody who was talking about, like, they even did a behind the scenes on how it took, like, 3 days and tons of money to film that episode, like, to film that portion of the episode, and we just could have gotten other stuff.
Yeah.
This was a frustrating season for me, and I feel like the fact that there's only one part of this season, one part of
this episode
that I really remember and like speaks to that, because I'm not spectacularly interested in Cersei and Jaime, because it's just a slow decline again, and watching her kind of descend into madness, for lack of a better word. We know the White Walkers are coming.
I don't know. I will say that Ronnie Greyjoying it up
he was a delight.
Is lovely.
He was a delight. Yeah. Pilou Asbæk, chef's kiss. Brilliant casting. We've said this before, that there was absolutely no way to capture the depth of depravity and villainy that Euron Greyjoy represents in the books, because he's essentially the third big bad.
Yeah.
That's going to close out the series. So he's on par. He's supposed to be on par of villains with Joffrey and Ramsay and even Tywin, but worse.
He's Joffrey and Ramsay without the restraint.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's not a joke.
He has all the power that they have, and he's had no one to tell him no. And if somebody did tell him no, he just probably killed them. And the fact that he shows up in King's Landing wearing guyliner, and oh my god, all the like mom's boyfriend jokes that came out of that appearance was just great, because there was no way they were going to be able to capture. They were going to be able to convey that depth of that in.
Without having him be Kiefer Sutherland's in The Lost Boys.
Yeah, like it just wasn't going to work if they tried to do that. So I'm just very glad that this was sort of a pragmatic decision that wound up being so entertaining.
I just want to say that no one has seen Euron Greyjoy and Max's brother from Stranger Things in the same room.
Oh god. I find myself with less to say about this one. I think just because it really was a lot of setup.
And because we know where we are. It's not just there's a lot of setup, but it's a lot of setup for what we saw 2 years ago.
Also, I will say that this
we saw most recently.
A great example of the opening sequence setting the tone for the season, because this was a very victorious season for House Stark, and it was a very victorious season for the audience, because we got a lot of people were avenged. This is the season that finally kills Littlefinger. This is the season that decisively avenges the Red Wedding by just wiping out House Frey to a man and turning it into an all-female, a single-sex commune, which is my headcanon for what's happening at the Twins right now.
Jaime makes a good decision.
We get Cersei's map room, which was just great. Her map floor.
Oh, yeah.
That was really close. Also one of my favorite parts of the season. We get Arya and Sansa finally uniting, and just the children, like the Stark children, coming back together. And there's also we also lose a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's, well, that's not victorious. So that doesn't really support my point. But we get to see these. There's a lot of satisfaction in this season, because like we get to see the dragons finally meet the Night King. We get to see like Daenerys finally get to Westeros and interact with Westerosi people. Everything kind of feels like it's coming together this season.
We get to see Tyrion be creepy.
Oh god!
Around, during boat sex.
Get to some boat sex in and of itself. Decently creepy. Especially
Targaryen family reunion 2017.
No, and then Targaryen family reunion. You won't even know it when it happens. I think what is also too, like, just the sheer creep factor of the fact that they overlaid that sex scene with voiceover of Jon's cousin brother pointing out that Jon is the heir to the Iron Throne, as Jon literally has sex with his aunt. That was just a lot. It was a scene I didn't quite know how to feel about. I mostly focused on like how like I wanted Daenerys' hair to be like unbraided at that point, but that wig is not going anywhere.
It's what happens when you breed flowers in the attic as a instruction manual.
Ugh. Ugh. Boy, if you ever like feel like looking up VC Andrews and the Flowers in the Attic series, because there's a series, it gets so much stranger. She goes down a rabbit hole and doesn't look back, and that's a satisfying Wikipedia rabbit hole. I highly recommend it.
Have we ever seen VC Andrews and George R. R. Martin in the same room? How much does she write about gravy?
I think she's pretty stranger. She's much stranger than George, because her stuff's happening in the real world.
Has she ever used the phrase "nipples on a breastplate"?
Oh, to her discredit now. Yeah, this is, I mean, I think it's impossible not to look at this episode and realize that it's, the only kind of new development that happens is Jorah, fucking using up another one of his 9 lives and managing to outlive Grayscale.
Yep.
Because Sam is, apparently there's no cure for Grayscale because no one is ballsy enough to do it. But that's it was kind of a good metaphor for, like, the Maesters at Old Town to begin with, because they're, like, they sort of play it safe, and they they live very insulated from the rest of the world and from what goes on around it, kind of like a more pleasant version of Castle Black. And I think the idea that they are just like, oh, well, this isn't worth the risk is probably a problem with their organization, and why they have not taken they are so kind of infatuated with their own intelligence that they haven't taken reports of the White Walkers seriously enough.
Mm-hmm.
And why Sam eventually leaves is because, as much as he wanted to be there, it is still a very stick in the mud organization. Yeah.
One of the things I'm most excited about in the books that will someday be finished is a lot more insight into the weirdness of the Citadel.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to just
get down and
uselessness of the Citadel.
Yeah. I mean, I did like a lot of the stuff in the Citadel. Jim Broadbent was great, but...
uselessness as an organization, not as scenes.
Yeah, like an organization full of uselessness, but like also very smart people. Yeah. Which I think is just sort of... George is really good at sort of creating this multifaceted perspective of how people are ignoring the White Walkers and how this was led to happen.
Everyone's ignoring the White Walkers in a new and exciting way.
Exactly. For new and exciting reasons. Yeah, there's really... If we go back from between the Winter is Coming and Dragonstone, there's kind of no comparing the two episodes because they're so different. I'm still just kind of marvel at how this show has evolved over its seasons and how completely it has evolved, and yet does not feel like it feels like it feels like a very natural, doesn't feel like it's jumped a shark. It feels like a very natural progression of this story, which I think is hard to execute, especially when you want to hold on to initially what made the story a hit in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that this story and these characters have been allowed to grow in the way they have been, I think is a credit. It's also, I think, a credit to the show's a credit to the show's production, and probably one of the reasons it's very popular. Very popular is an understatement.
Yeah, it's... I think people like it.
I think people like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get renewed, but...
Never say never.
Never say never. I also kind of got it's Daenerys. I remember when she got to Dragonstone, I think because they finally showed the exterior of it and used a different location, a different exterior location, that beach in Spain. I did not associate it with Stannis at all.
No.
And I kind of, when she takes down the Baratheon banners, I was like, oh yeah, the Baratheons were once key players in this whole thing, and now Gendry is the only one that's left of any significance.
Yeah, it's early Dragonstone felt like Pike.
Yeah.
This Dragonstone feels like Greece. I know it's Spain. But...
There's just more sunlight, I think. Yeah. A lot of Westeros was very dark. I feel like I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I'm trying to think of when you think of just how gripping this show is and how they're so good at like making you sort of forget about everything else but what's happening right in front of you and what's happening in that season. I think Stannis is a great example of that. The Greyjoy arc is a great example of that. Oberyn's entire arc is so anchored by Pedro Pascal and his sort of single-minded vision to get revenge for Elia, and that's over in 9 episodes. It's really interesting. And going back and looking at everything, like there was a time when Robb and Catelyn were like 70%, and Robb's War was 70% of that show, and it's just gone, and it's completely irrelevant now. Like I never think about it,
especially since we didn't get Stoneheart.
Fucker, you had to bring it up. Still, I also feel like that episode, that Hounds episode where he meets up with the Brotherhood without banners, was a naked fuck you to audience members who wanted Stoneheart, because we get that nice long shot of Sandor staring in the water. I'm like, oh, she's gonna rise up out of the water. This is what it's gonna happen. But no, we got fucking Lemon Cloak. I desperately needed to see him.
So, with that, so we're recording this on Tuesday night, April 9th. We still don't know the title of season 8, episode 1.
We sure don't.
Do you have any predictions?
We're gonna take a stab at it, folks. Family Matters.
That's where I was going. That is literally what I was going to say.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It was either going to be Family Matters or All in the Family.
Or just Arya meets a dragon.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go with...
Which is mostly all I care about for season premiere. I don't need to see her reunion with Jon. I don't need to see her meeting Daenerys. I need to see Arya meet Drogon, and I need to see them develop a secret handshake. And then I will be somewhat mollified about the absence of Lady Stoneheart.
Flowers in the Attic is also taken, so I'm gonna go with Welcome Back, Stannis.
Oh man,
I can't believe you're both thinking Family Matters for 2.5 hours.
I wasn't thinking it for 2.5 hours. I thought of it right then, but I was thinking about something family themed for sure. If Stannis comes back though, somebody, and he knows who he is, owes me $1,000. Not gonna name names. It's not you. Okay. Thank you guys for sitting with us. This turned into a hulking episode, but it was really fun to do a retrospective instead of doing a full rewatch, to just sort of touch on the larger, finer story points and seeing it. Really, I'm really so excited to see season 8, and it's so rare that you get to be part of a zeitgeist like this and see a story that takes everyone by storm so much, and then get to see it to completion like this. So I'm really excited. Thanks for coming on this journey with us.
Yeah, we've got probably 7 more episodes. I assume we'll do a...
Oh yeah, we're doing a wrap-up.
We'll do a wrap-up. We'll tie up any loose ends that they don't.
Provided my liver gives out. Provided my liver doesn't give out.
Look forward to seeing you, hearing from you on Tuesdays. Let us know what you think of the show.
Yeah, and please, like I said, record yourselves singing the theme song, please. It is so fun. We will make it our theme song for whatever episode you send it to us for, and we will or will not name drop you based on your preference.
Yep.
Just take a voice memo, send it to gotthronespodcast@gmail.com, and we will be forever in your debt. Thanks so much, guys.
Yep. Bye, folks.
See you next week. Bye.